Welcome to the Kadara Woman podcast, where we amplify the voices of inspiring African women making waves across the globe. I'm your host, Lala Sheba Harris. So if you're new here, please make sure to hit that notification button so you never miss an episode. And if you're loving what you hear, leave us a rating and a review. It helps more people discover these amazing untold stories. All right, today we're diving into the extraordinary journey of Joy Ekuta, a Nigerian American powerhouse whose path has been anything but predictable. From the halls of MIT to becoming an accidental social justice warrior, Joy's story is a roller coaster of resilience, innovation, and unexpected twists. So get ready to hear how a pandemic pivot led to a movement that changed corporate America and discover the power of embracing life's detours. This episode is all about finding your path even when the roadmap looks nothing like you imagined. Without further ado, let's welcome Joy Ekuta to the Kadara Woman podcast. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, listeners. I'm super excited to talk to Joy Ekuta today. She's the co-founder and chief strategy and operations officer at Retrospect, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Joy, how are you doing? Hello, welcome.
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm very excited to be talking to you today. So thank you for the
Yay.
opportunity.
Oh no, thank you for saying yes. And I'm excited to get into your business on this
My
podcast.
business or my business?
Your business or my business in a good way. I love the fact that we both have gaps, which I think is cool. So it makes me a little partial when you smile. Um, actually, I have an interesting question, and maybe we'll get
Okay.
to it later. Yeah, we'll get to it later. Let's just jump into your business right now. But you're looking
Okay.
good, and I know for those of you who are like wondering, Lola, there's no video. Well, just imagine she looks great.
Lola
Go,
looks great too. So
I appreciate that. But go like the social media if you want to see how she looks.
well, my socials are private.
um. All right, so let's get into your business. So, a couple of things I found out about you. You have a Bachelor of Science degree. I'm not going to say what it is because I want you to say what it is when the time comes, but it's an
Okay.
impressive one. You're also a serial entrepreneur, passionate about spaces that intersect people, technology, and culture. You have a couple of businesses that we'll get into. And then you also have a nonprofit organization as well. And so we're going to talk about all of that. But before we do that, I'd like to start from the beginning. Tell me more about your heritage, the African country that you rep, and how that's influenced you today.
Of course. So my heritage, I am born and bred in Nigeria, but my family actually relocated to the US when I was a toddler. So about 2 years old, moved here and we ended up living all over the US. So I lived in Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, all of that before college. And
Oh, wow.
I always share that because people are like, so where do you actually claim as home? And I always say Nigeria is what I claim as home because when I came here, that was the only thing that was consistent across any of the states that I lived in. And if you can imagine with my parents, they didn't know anything about American culture. So we we get here. So at home, I was definitely in Nigeria. I was cooking, cleaning, it's the music, it's everything. But then at school, I was learning American
American.
culture and learning Americana. So it's very much part of like my background and the way that I move.
And how many states have you? I mean, did you hit all
Now,
50?
I haven't hit all 50 that I've lived in. I have
Okay.
lived, like, formally lived in 10 states. So I would say I've lived
Wow.
in 20% of the US.
Man, your taxes must have been fun at some point. Yes,
Yeah.
sign.
Listen,
Okay.
I've suffered. I can't move
And,
again.
and and then of course you mentioned you're Nigerian, so I have to ask, how has that influenced the woman you are today? Because I think there's gonna be cultural nuances in there.
Yeah, I think it's one influence way I move in two ways, I'm going to say. So the first one is like from an education perspective. Nigerians, if anybody knows a Nigerian woman, Nigerian man, like we're very serious about the work that we do. That's both in an educational aspect, but then also in a professional aspect. So I feel like, grew up inside the house, would come back from school, present a 98 to my dad, and he'd say, so where's the other 2%? So that sort of mentality, is push the way that I move into anything that I do. So I'm always trying to do it at like the top and like the highest level and caliber that's there. So it's not like, oh, but so and so's daughter is doing this. No, it's me, like the one that's doing that. So I think that's the first way. The second one is respect. And I feel like that has come up a lot more in my personal life. I think as Nigerians, like we just hold that to such regard, the way that you respect another person and like how you actually express that. And so I think in both my business and my personal relationships, it's one of the top qualities that I'm looking for in anybody that I engage with or partner with. Just having a high
Wow.
level of respect for each
I like that. I like that. So
other.
education and respect.
Yeah.
And before we even go into the education piece, do you remember what you wanted to be when you were younger?
I do. So I wanted to be a lot of things. And one can say that I'm now a lot of things, but I initially said first wanted to be an inventor because I loved Inspector Gadget and I was like, oh my goodness, like all these, things I want to invent like that. But outside of that, then I said that I wanted to be a chef, a violinist, or an artist.
And
So
was this happening every time you were changing states, or it was just
You know, that kind of was following the flow. I think it just came up with, I don't know, the side of things. Like violin,
yeah?
I started playing when I was 7 and I played that for 10 years. So I was like, oh, I could do that like full time. Art, I wanted to do, but then I had an art teacher and she said that like I wasn't good. So then I decided not to do it. Not because I didn't think I was good, but you know.
Okay, so but we mentioned education earlier, right? So you talked about our culture and so you wanted to be a violin chef, inventor. You're not checking off the four right now. So what did your parents want you to be?
Yeah. Nigerians, they say to be successful, you got to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And the reason that we moved to this country was because both of my parents wanted to advance their educational careers. So my dad he's a doctor, he does pharmacology. My mom was a registered nurse for years, so she did nursing. My elder brother went off into medicine as well too. He's doing neurology. And then there's me. So with me, I was like, I don't know if that. I said I wanted to be a doctor. That's because I wanted to follow my father's footsteps. But when I got older, started learning biology. That's just not my ministry or my blessing. And so as maybe the engineering side of things, I always really, really loved math. So like that was an acceptable career for them. And I ended up going to a school of technology. So my parents were very happy with that. But then the
Are
day
we
that
just
I
gonna
came,
skip over what school you went to? Because I think it's
we
let's
are
talk,
gonna skip away.
what degree did you end up getting and from where? So your parents wanted you to be a doctor. You followed in that footstep naturally because you saw your dad. But what did you end up actually doing?
Yes, so I ended up getting my degree in brain and cognitive sciences from MIT.
Brain and cognitive sciences from MIT.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, and then I thought you also got a minor in chemistry and computer science.
hmm I
So you
did.
tried all the
I know. I
degrees.
know.
You
Me
just
and me,
gotta leave that
honestly.
on the side.
Lola, I know we have a lot to get to in the conversation. Those are small things. People get searched. They can look.
Those are small things. She said, guy, any listener, she said brain and cognitive sciences from MIT is small things. Well, in that case, let's just keep going because clearly, those of us that are kind of engineering degree, nothing. She has nothing on us. I mean, she has a lot of books in her background, so that I mean, you know what? I have nothing to say. I'm shocked that you just brain and cognitive sciences. Ah, Nigerians. Anyways, let's keep going. So, obviously, you got the degree. You pivoted from what your parents thought you were going to do, which was a medical degree. How did that inform what you ended up? How you started your career?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. So I should come back to, yes, doing the brain and cognitive scientist side and then starting to learn the computer science and chemistry. Prior to MIT, I knew nothing about coding, programming, anything in that world.
Hmm.
So I initially came in and I was like, I like chemistry, I like math, so I'm going to do chemical engineering. That's what I thought I was doing.
I was there
And
before.
I remember. So, I came in the way that MIT is structured. You actually can't declare your major until the end of your freshman year because they want you to just explore, like talk to people, really understand what path you want to land on. And so I came in, started talking to some chemical engineers. I was like, okay, this is a lot like it's like the process of the engineering, not as much as the chemistry, which I like. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll do chemistry. But then I took an intro to neuroscience class, or intro to psychology class, sorry. I absolutely loved it because it's like, oh my goodness, it's like the way that people work. It's the why. Like this is just naturally how I
Yeah.
think about things. So I wanted to do that. Decided to pursue that career. But then I had a lot of friends who did computer science. So they would make these jokes and be like, "Hello world, haha!" Like "Hello world, haha!" I don't get it. So, after that, I did my own. I know I took an intro to computer science class. I loved it. I love just like the logic based way of thinking about things. It's the way I naturally think and operate. So I ended up continuing to take classes there. Bring these up because I come up on graduation and I was like, okay, well, I still did all I fulfilled everything for pre med, so I'm gonna do pre med, but I want to do 2 gap years, like just to make sure and to give myself time, primarily because the people in the office at MIT who are like supposed to help you with the med school applications, they're like, Joy, your application doesn't read like somebody who wants to go to like medical school. They're like,
Oh wow.
you're really here. They're like, you've done like a lot of engineering things. You're not like shadowing doctors. You haven't been doing that volunteering. Like all of your different internships have been in engineering. So like, why do you actually want to be a doctor? I was like, I want to help people. So yeah, I
Oh
want to be a
wow.
doctor. So I was gonna use the 2 years to like, beef up my skills on the science side. So
Were
I
your
ended up taking,
parents? Oh, sorry. I was just
go
gonna
on.
say, were your parents in your ear when you were still thinking you want to be on the pre med side?
They were. So what actually happened was, again, I went to MIT to be doing chemical engineering. So when I came back and I like called my dad, I was like, okay, actually, I found this major. I like it. It's like intro to brain and cognitive sciences. Mine was like, brain what? Science what? He's like, the only reason I allowed you to go to MIT, mind you, yeah, I went to MIT on my own conviction, but he's like, only reason that I allowed you to go was because if you're gonna go to a school of technology, then you're gonna do engineering. Why would you go and do this brain like thing? It doesn't make sense. It's not well studied. I was like, I don't know because it's interesting. I'm curious. So at that point, I actually didn't tell my parents I was staying on the pre med track because like I transparently experienced so much like trauma from like that level of disappointment, and I do think that
Mm,
just comes from the Nigerian like traits in me to like not want to disappoint your parents. Like you want to perform well, you want to be all
yeah.
this side. And so my dad's reaction just maybe not want to share that like medicine was still there as a potential option, and then if I come and disappoint again and be like, oh, actually I changed my mind again, it just wasn't going to go well. So
You edited what you told them as you were going through your college career. And so you get to graduation day, right?
yep.
And then you're graduating with this degree. And I'm guessing they're still like, I guess we'll show up for the graduation, right? To support
It's
this brain science degree. And then what happened next?
Yeah, it was short for the graduation, but I had a job opportunity after graduation, and I was going to be doing a technical and medical fellow at Duke University. So it was
Wow.
specifically under this global health lab. So I was going to travel around with different students and take them to volunteer in different hospitals, also support there, and then also be working on it's a biomedical engineering lab. So I was going to get to, again, do both. My parents, what they heard in their ear was, okay, so you're going from MIT to Duke. Great, cool. It's another top school. That's really the thing that they heard in their ear. Anything else wasn't there. So
Interesting. But it sounds like you still did it even though I guess, how did you feel about the support from home, even when you were making those transitions?
yeah, it was. I don't know. I don't know that I feel all this support was there as much as like, okay, you're going to the right name schools, you're going to the right thing. And I think for me with the lab that I worked at Duke, I was like, okay, I can do this because it's still that mix of medicine and engineering, being in a biomedical engineering lab. Had it not been that, I actually don't think I would have been as excited about it. Anyways, I worked in that lab for a year. They ran out of funding for the role, as happens in
Oh,
academia. Yeah, so I went back to MIT and I worked with an office there just to help them with a program that they had for high school juniors to learn more engineering, science, all of that over the summer period. And I help them to build out a role just to like really optimize and prioritize around some of the recruiting and admissions process for that. And I did that while applying to medical schools.
okay. So you're applying to medical school. You're still trying to check that NIDA box. And then And that was during your gap year, right? The 2 gap
Yeah, that
years.
was the second gap year.
The 7 gap year. Wow. And they're not putting pressure on you that the gap year is going.
Oh no. So during the second year, because I was applying to med schools at that time, then they know the process is happening. So it wasn't pressure that it's not happening. The pressure came up when I wasn't getting acceptances.
Let's talk about that.
I applied to, I think it was 36 schools. It's between 32 to 36 schools. Just
You
medicine.
applied to 36 schools for medical.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happened? From looking back now,
I think looking back, it's probably two things. So one, like my grades freshman year, not freshman year, I would say sophomore year, when it was more of like the hard sciences, so more of the biology, the neurosciences. I said that one's not my ministry or my blessing. Chemistry I can do. That one I can't do. So medicine, people are gonna look at that and be like, okay, these aren't strong enough. So, but of course my grades went up from there to senior year. So not like, my GPA wasn't the highest. Then there's the MCAT. I- People may not believe me when I say this, but I have a lot of testing anxiety. Like I do not do well in like tests. If I'm doing like an interview or if I'm like structuring something out or putting to like a product program, I can do that in my sleep. But once you say something's a test or an interview in that way, I just really struggle with it. And that's not to discount why I did not perform as well on the MCAT as I did. I think, again, MCAT is a measure of a lot of that more hard science, which was not my ministry or my blessing. So I think that, and then third, of course, my background was speaking so much to like this engineering side and this peak, even though I was like, yeah, no, I want to do medicine. I want to help people. And like, this is why all those things together, I'm sure that missions committee was like, it's okay.
so
You'll find your path.
how did you process the rejection and figure out a way to move through that?
It was a lot. Like I will say, people knew that I was applying to medical schools, but I probably wasn't as open or transparent with most people around me around like the rejections because I just felt a lot of shame around it. One and two, I'm also somebody who's so used to like I work really hard at something, like I can figure out the thing. Like I can get it. Even if it's just like one acceptance, like I can get my foot in, like I can work it around. And not to say that this was the first time, but it was one of the earlier times of feeling like, wow, I'm literally actually putting all of my effort into this and it's still not enough. And ah, I don't know that I can say that I actually processed it at that time, but I really navigated it beyond just being like, okay, well, like, just like I still have a job, I'm putting myself into work. And well, actually, you'll find this out throughout my story. But while I'm working, this random woman reaches out to me on LinkedIn and she was like, "Hey, I have this job. I think that you actually might be great for it." I knew nothing about like corporate recruiting, anything there, but she was like, "Yeah, I have these like two roles. One of them was at Google, one of them was at Two Sigma. Google, I knew very well. Two Sigma, I didn't know what that was." She was like, "It's a quantitative hedge fund. It's all this." I'm like, all of these things are going over my head. Like finance is not where I've spent time. But she started to tell me more about like the team and the organization. I was like, okay, sure, like I'll have a conversation, thinking nothing will go from this. And I also hadn't worked in a corporate enterprise level company at that point. So I wasn't thinking anything of it. That place was in New York. I was in Boston at that time. But I ended up doing interviews, meeting with a lot of people, and they're like, okay, why would somebody from MIT do recruiting? I think it just piqued a lot of
Wow.
curiosity for the
Wow.
team, but I ended up getting the offer. And I don't know that I can say that it helped me process my feelings around like medical school and those rejections. I honestly didn't do that until much later, but it gave me something else to be like, okay, well, there's something here. There's an option. It's still, it's this company that while
Right.
it's in finance, it started again by an engineer and a scientist. I was like, okay, it's more engineering culture. Cool. So I can go dabble and play over there. So I think it just gave me something to distract my mind from and like learn and do and apply to. I don't know.
I'm getting a thread of curiosity that's actually just pushing you through. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
this is. I'm still waiting for this, but I'll keep going in this direction because I'm actually curious about what's going on. Because you also mentioned that earlier when you said if it wasn't in engineering and the biomedical engineering, you probably wouldn't have done it. So there's a curiosity that's kind of like subtly guiding you through the whole process. All right, and so
Yeah.
you work with Two Sigma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when did Pinterest and all the other corporate jobs come?
they all came in later. I'll keep this actually pretty short from Two Sigma. So Two Sigma, I did there 2 years. I was doing recruiting and program management. One of my like mentors introduced me to product management. So I ended up like doing a side course at General Assembly for product management. We're gonna come back full cycle to that later. But I did that, and then I was recruited to a new startup. It was about 25 people at that point, but it was being started by the former CEO of Credit Suisse. And so it was like him, a number of other like these sweet people from multiple different banks. They're like, hey, we're starting this company. We want to scale it up from 20 people to about 400 within the next 2 years. Looking for somebody to like help us build it up from the ground up. Like I had been doing recruiting, but I hadn't built up something in that sense from the ground up. But again, I was excited about it. So I ended up, and I knew I was going to start my own company at some point. So I was like, okay, this will allow me to be like working directly with the founders and just really getting to see day to day some of the trade offs and how this works. So yeah, I went to that company for a year. And then after that, I went to another startup. That one was about 30 people, also looking to scale up. So that was started by the former CHRO from Google, and he had written this book. So I had read the book, and he was a big leader in the like people operations of the field and the space. And I admired his thoughts around people and technology and processes and all of that together. So followed his journey for a while. And then when he announced starting a company, I sent him and his co-founder. Yeah, I did not know them personally. I did not have that direct connection, but I sent them an email and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I see that you're starting this thing. There's not a lot of information. I just know that I want to work with you. Here's my resume. Here's what I can do. Here's what I want to do. Like, if there's ever a fit, let me know." And at that time, I didn't hear back from them. But about 8 months into their journey, then they reached out and they're like, "Hey, we think we have something that may be of interest." That's while I'm at this first startup. Ended up taking on the conversations. Things went well. I got the offer. Ended up going there. So I was there for a year. But I will say this is probably one of the breaking points in my career where I was doing the job and I was doing the role, but I ended up getting fired a year. So this
Oh,
is period number two of yes,
another
dis-
rejection.
rejection. But this is rejection of me being like, wait, I can do the role, I can do this thing. The question is probably then why'd you get fired, Joy? I would
Wow.
say this is where I have fully learned like founder employee match sometimes it's not there. So I
Hmm.
respect this person and I believe they respect me, but we're actually butting heads than more than not, unlike somebody that's being
So expand on that some more, unpack that some more. So you said the one of the key takeaways you got from that experience was the well, one, you literally worked hard to get this opportunity. You stayed on them. They came after 8 months of you sharing your resume. You did the work. You were confident in it. There was no like questions there, and then you got fired. And so your big takeaway was that it's a founder employee match.
yeah. So I think there's a lot more build up to that, is what I'd say.
Okay.
So this company, and I'll try and keep it more limited on what I share here because
Yeah.
of where it's at, but there was a lot of people naturally with the founders. They had all worked at Google together. And so I think even in the ways that the recruiting process was built out, was very catered towards like a Google style of thinking. And so this is something that, had raised constantly from the beginning of like, hey, even like the side comments of, oh, well, like Google, like this person would have made sense on like this team. Those references they don't vibe with what you're trying to scale a company from the beginning. One. Two, it's really important if you're scaling out a team, if you do want it to be as diverse and inclusive as possible, you got to do that from the very first hires because that stretches out to the network, it stretches out to like what people are attracted to. And so I did, actively go out, I sourced and I built different lists as well too and tried to make sure that existed within our pipeline. But I think again, what I recognize more now, having been a founder, I think I had different expectations for like how much time the founders like could invest and needed to be part of this and needed to be pushing in certain areas that I don't believe I always communicated that well when I'm thinking about like my main stakeholders and my main colleagues, because I was a recruiting team of one, my main colleagues were the founders of the company. And I think sometimes like that level of proximity to them made me believe like, well, I have a full understanding of like everything that you're working on. You got to prioritize this. I need this from you in these ways where I don't know that that was actually the case. So
Interesting. Wow. So you also mentioned that when you were getting these opportunities, you knew you wanted to run your own company at some point. So maybe that's a
yeah.
good way to segue into what I call it the Kadara moment. Like it's what I found is a lot of people at some point in their journey they figure that moment of clarity when they're like, this is where I want to go spend my time. This is where my true calling lies. When did that happen for you?
Yeah, so it happened after this period of getting fired. So, like the first month after I got fired, I honestly couldn't get out of bed. But it was a full level depression. Like I developed like irritable bowel syndrome. Like I was super anxious. I have an anxious personality, but this is the first time that I like started to sort of spiral. I'm like, well, maybe if I had done that conversation differently, or maybe if I like had put into this, or like maybe if I had like followed up on this like on time, like just so many things that spiraled in my head. But one, I'm like so grateful for my community that was out there in the Bay Area, because my old colleagues as well as friends, like they made it a point to like come out and see me at my place and like remind me of the things that I had done or I was capable of. And so that's one, I would say it's the only thing that got me through that period. But then after that, I was like, okay, let me try and like apply to some jobs now and see if that's something of interest. I think maybe I put in 3, 4 applications, and I was like, you know what? I don't know that I can work for somebody else right now. Like I actually don't want to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to go through that labor. And so it felt earlier than the time that I actually wanted to start my own company. But I was like, what better time than now? So at
Mm-hmm.
that point is when I started to seek out a couple different resources. I did a program called Founder Gym just to learn around like the capital raising side. I
Mm-hmm.
did like YC's virtual startup school. So just to
Okay.
learn like a lot of like the fundamentals. I did another course called Venture Deals to really learn like the terms from cap table, all of that, just to set myself up for like what was needed. And then if we go back to that product management course that I've taken on the side while at Two Sigma
With General Assembly, right?
at General Assembly,
Okay.
I had this idea that I did through the course where I was like, I'm planning so many events for different friends, like their bachelorettes, and I'm planning people's surprise birthday parties, and I'm planning events at work. I was like, there's got to be an easier way to do this for smaller events. And so that is when I first came up with the concept for what eventually became that first startup called Host Wambe, or
Mm-hmm.
if you hear the Nigerian reference from a
Yeah.
Wambe,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's like a platform to hire affordable party planners. The way I thought about it was, hey, it's a platform you can find the party planners, but I'm going to do it based off of like different small scale events. So your bar mitzvahs, your quinceañeras, your milestone birthday parties. But once you actually hire somebody into place, then you can track the full planning process as it happens. So instead of
Wow.
this back and forth like text and email, you can see everything within the platform.
Oh, so it was like a lack of a better word, like a CRM, like like a portal
Yeah.
for that managing all the multiple vendors for the event. So there's nothing
Yeah.
like that before then.
So there's nothing like that for like small life events that
Oh,
happen. There are for
okay.
bigger events, so for your weddings or any sort of like
Okay.
corporate events. But those
Yeah.
one-off things like a kid's birthday party, where people are like they're struggling to try and manage and plan the thing themselves. Like, but there's people
Yes.
who can do it, and then there's party planners who are like, "Ooh, that budget might be too small for me to be doing multiple at the same time." But if there's a way to reduce some of the communication that's there, like,
Oh, I could have used that a couple of times
ah,
because there was a lot of text messages and Excel sheets and
yeah,
notepads and dedicated notepad for this birthday party,
yeah,
especially
yeah,
for kids' birthday parties. So let me back up a second. So you were educating yourself in the startup lingo. You did Y startup. You did the venture deals. You did the product development for General Assembly way back earlier. You're putting all these pieces together. It sounds like you were taking these courses. You didn't really have the idea, but you still were going through, and then it came together in that journey.
yeah. The idea I had from that product management course. So 2017, it was always an idea in the back of my head, but I was like, I don't know if I have the right resources, the right time, the right skills to be able to like start the platform that I want to start. So when I started doing these courses, it was it was all in support of learning the business side, but I had the idea. And so this is like fall 2019.
Okay. Aha.
Anyway. you,
Uh-oh.
you know where that's going.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So
I
so
mean,
so so what happened?
well, I started it, and as soon as I started it, friends had use cases for it. So one friend immediately was like, "Oh, like I need to plan my," and that's my now co-founder. But his wife was like, "Oh, I want to like plan his 30th birthday party. We can run it through this platform." So I'm building things at the same time. So like all the templates and such. Of course, with any sort of startup, I'm not building out the platform from scratch first. So starting in like spreadsheets, what it looks like to plan it out, the different selections, options. So that was the first event. But then people who had gone to that event, I like started branding. I didn't know those terms at that time, but like on the emails, it'd be like powered by Hostel Wambe, or it's like in the
Yeah.
footer of like any of the events page. There was three people who went to that event who were like, "Oh my goodness, I went to this. This was like so well executed. I have this event coming up." One was a citizenship party, so somebody like recently got their citizenship. One was somebody wanted to do a birthday party. The other one was like not a book release, some sort of like spoken event like that, but they wanted it because they saw the quality that happened from this first event. So then I started doing those events, and all this while I'm trying to build up the events. I'm trying to make connections with a lot of party planners in the Bay Area. I'm learning a lot more around what were separate from my own assumptions to what their
Mm-hmm.
day to day actually look like, the different
Mm-hmm.
tools, building this out. And then from those parties, people were like, "Oh, I have like a housewarming event that's coming up. I want to plan this. I have a baby shower that's coming up." So the word was getting out, and like I had events in the pipeline. I also, in what I learned in like the capital raising side, I need enough traction if I'm gonna go to VCs. Actually show them because I believe this idea is here, but I need to be able to like show them that people are willing to pay for it, which they were across the board. So I given myself a timeline of 6 months, try and get the traction into place in terms of events, in terms of the different connections I had, to then start go out and fundraising. I was like, that'll probably take me 6 months to do. You can imagine where the 6 months fell. This
Right
is
in the
in
beginning of
February
COVID.
2020. Yeah. So I was one of the first ones where like just like that events like started getting canceled, everything in the pipeline
Oh
like
wow.
cleared up. Then we had our whole like the shelter in place call. We didn't know how long that was going to be. People started to do a lot of like birthday parties over Zoom or celebrations. And the questions I did start getting from people is, "Joy, people are looking for like social connection. They're looking do this. Like you should pivot Hostawambe to that." But my whole motivation in like starting the company was to make it easier for people to get together in person, and doing things in a
Mm,
virtual space just wasn't going to like fit in that same way. So at that
wow.
point I was like, okay, I'm gonna put the business on hold. I don't know what I'm doing in between. When I started the company, I was like, okay, even if it doesn't work out, I'm in the Bay Area. There's lots of jobs that I hear. But no, if you remember the beginning of COVID, that was the beginning of a lot of layoffs. So
Right.
now it's layoffs. Now the industry for like what I was building around is completely obliterated. Didn't I didn't know what was happening. I was going through another period of like,
Oh
okay,
my
did
goodness.
I did I did I fail because of the time? Did I fail because like I should have been doing this faster? Should I have been like starting the conversations? There was just a lot happening in that period.
So there's a lot to unpack in that. And obviously, there's another transition that you made from that. So let's even go back into Host Owambe. So I love the name. I thought that was a very clever way to combine the cultural piece and make it memorable at the same time from a brand standpoint. But you mentioned that you are gaining traction from a test model. Sounds like you're probably using your engineering skills there. You did an MVP, so minimal viable product, tested out, is growing traction. And then you mentioned that 6 months in, COVID happens. People are telling you to pivot, but you didn't pivot. Looking back now, how do you feel about that decision?
Oh, I feel great
You
because
feel
me not
great.
me not pivoting is actually what opened up the door for like the company
Oh,
I now have. Like the past
okay.
4 years,
Oh
it wouldn't
wow.
have happened had I
Oh
pivoted.
wow. I love that.
Yeah.
And so were you how what were your emotions during the COVID time? Because we have medical school history, we have fired from the startup history, we have we have the energy of, oh my God, I'm gonna go start this company and take all these classes. Oh my God, let's start this, and then you get in traction. COVID hits. What is your mindset at this point? What's going through your head?
The way I'm laughing now is actually what my mindset was.
You're like, hey, yeah.
I literally had no idea. I was like,
Wow.
I don't. Me also making the decision to like bootstrap this thing for 6 months means money is
Mm,
not coming in the door for six
right,
months.
right.
So my question at that time was, okay, I'm in the Bay Area. How am I gonna afford to like stay
Mm,
and live in the Bay Area? Two, what am I actually gonna go and do? Like, I didn't want to go back and do recruiting. And then I just didn't want to apply in a period where a lot of people are getting laid off. Like, I've been on the recruiting side. I know what it looks like managing the numbers. I didn't really want to go into that. And then with the idea to pivot it, I don't think I operate very well in like virtual spaces. I've gotten better over time, but I'm more of like an in-person sort of like vibes and community. And so that's really why I didn't want to pivot this company. It's like, okay, anything virtual events, like there's other people who can do that. That's just not
right,
what I want to do. But the period,
right.
but like my emotions was I literally don't know what to do and I just need somebody to like tell me what to do. But like I really I don't know what to do. And the world seems like they're crashing around us. Does anything matter anymore? Like it really was a very
So what did
chaotic sense
so
of
what did
emotions.
so how did you pull through that? Even that chaotic voice speak? Like, I don't even know what to do. Can someone just tell me, like, who did you talk to? How did you get through that?
Yeah. So my now co-founder, he had actually started a creative collective. It was called Hella Creative. And it was again started virtually online, but essentially was like a Slack group. And then every Thursday we'd get on a video call. People would like grab something to drink. It could be
Wait, how did
tea, it
you
could be
meet him
wine.
though?
My co-founder,
Yeah.
we went to undergrad together.
Okay, okay.
So we
Okay,
mhm.
sorry, keep going.
No worries. But he had started this group of friends and he like invited me to join it. So I started joining and like that was just good from a sense of like, I don't know, it was a mix of like creatives, like entrepreneurs, like people in tech. And so a lot of people had the same experience. And I was like, okay, so it's not just me. Even though like I was starting this company, it's not just me who's like trying to figure out these very unknown times. And
Mm,
so that was like, good for like 2, 3 weeks going into the pandemic. But then George Floyd was murdered. At this point, we all get on this call, and I think like that was just the limit for everybody who was on the call. That we're like, okay, we've all been inside, like we're still dealing with like black people being murdered outside when we're all literally inside. It help us make it make sense. And so
right.
this is like 2 weeks out from Juneteenth, and so we started talking about getting outside to socially distance, and we were like, okay, you know what? We're all going to take the day off and we're going to go outside for Juneteenth. And this starts this conversation of like Juneteenth as a holiday, which you're in Texas, so you may, know it a little bit more at that point. I didn't know too much about the holiday at that point. But once we started just talking about the history, it started this conversation of like, why isn't Juneteenth like a holiday in the first place? And we're like, well, we're going to make it our own holiday. So again, the creators that we were and just like trying to have an outlet from like the chaos. We some of us got together that weekend. We put up a website and like again just made it like a little bit more information about Juneteenth. But then having worked in HR and recruiting, I wrote some email templates because I know the language to use. Okay, this is what people can send to their CEOs, their HR manager, their ERG leads. Like there were different templates that people could
Wow.
send out to request for the day off without counting on PTO. At that time, companies are putting up black squares. Everybody's trying to figure out what their
Right.
their
She said
corporate
black squares.
response. No, I'm
That
just
was
saying
true.
they figure
That
out
is
the
true.
corporate response, and so we put this up. But then, I believe in social pressure, so that's actually where I learned like Airtable is like we need a way to like display like what companies are actually like signing on board to do this. So
So
we
basically
integrated
calling
like
them
an
out.
Airtable. Not
So you're
calling them
calling
out,
them out.
calling them in. It's just make it on the list. You made this day off, so. But I'm saying we put that together in about 48 hours, 60 companies have signed on board, which we're like, yeah, wait, this is exciting. Like, I was already
Wait,
excited
wait,
at
wait,
that
wait.
point.
Pause. How did you get from you guys building a website, uh, coming up with templates, and then 60 companies signed up on this Airtable spreadsheet?
Yes, so on that cadence, we made the website within 2 days. Like when I say it was a very quick website, we really made assets for social. We did it in 2 days. The templates, again, I'm writing that. My co-founder, he's doing like a lot of the visual design. We had like two other people who are also working on like some of the resources. This was a very quick sprint and like, I don't know, it wasn't meant to be. what it turned into. But we did that. And then because it's the people in this social collective who were also asking their employers for the day off, then they're
Mm.
getting that buy-in that we can put those companies on board. What did happen though with the 60 companies is that Jack Dorsey, also announced Twitter and Square. We're going to be having Juneteenth off. And somebody within the collective had worked at Twitter. And I guess, they at least were close enough proximity to Jack that when he makes this announcement, we're like, okay, tell him about like what we're doing. So that person sent him the link. He saw it. He ended up reposting it for us, like on his like thread, announced like the
Whoa.
Juneteenth stuff. And if you imagine, like Jack at that time, I had a lot of, a lot of connections, a lot of
Yeah,
respect across the industry. And so
right.
it gave us a lot of credibility very quickly. And so next thing you know, companies start signing up for things. And as they're signing up, we're doing this for free. Like we're not getting paid, but I'm a
Wow.
businesswoman. So first, we built this and Automatic, the parent company of WordPress, they were like, hey, we see that you're doing this thing, you're building it on WordPress. Let us know if you need anything. We're like, actually,
They
this
reached
is
out
like,
they reached out to you?
because it's getting a lot of traction as like companies are getting the day off and we're building it on the platform. So they said
Wow.
that they would like release some features for us. Like again, nothing paid, so we don't have to do anything there. For Airtable, I asked a friend who worked there, like, hey, can we actually get this enterprise level like for free just so we have all the functionality around the tools? They
Yeah.
gave it to us. Then there was a PR firm who was like, "Hey, we really love what you're doing. Would love to support like any in-kind support that you need." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Let us know what you need to do." So they took that on. They gave us about 45 hours of in-kind support. And so like any sort of company that could help us, then
Wow.
yeah, we took it. So within 2 weeks, like when I say this thing snowballed, I mean it. This is a 2 week period from
Wow.
George Floyd murdered to Juneteenth. So every day at that point, it's literally getting like a lot of emails and communications. And the ways it was working at that time was I had set up the Airtable so that if people had like a public announcement, I was like, you just need to put the link in there. But if you don't have a public announcement, that's okay. But you have to email this alias with like the internal communications that you're sending out to the team. And a lot of companies sent them. So I'm reading through these like every day and making sure that it's clear, it's valid, it's by like somebody within the company. And what we started to notice was a lot of people were like, hey, are there other ideas around like what we could do or what we could like build out? So internally on our side, again, people are doing this on the side of work. We're just doing it free time, building and refining the website. People started talking about a lot of different events. So we created a separate Airtable to like basically crowdsource and allow people to like submit if they're hosting an event for Juneteenth around the country. So
Wow.
people were outsourcing using that as a centralized location. Then a lot of like publications started reaching out. I think it ended up being 60 publications, but and people were just talking about this thing that we're doing. And within that period, I want to say it was about 650 companies leading up to Juneteenth. And companies are like, I don't know, they like wanted us to speak on panels, do this, but people wanted us to do it on Juneteenth. And we're like, hey, we've already said like Juneteenth is like, it's a day free of labor. That also means a day free of unpaid labor. So literally, we are not doing that. We Yeah. So we still went outside as intended and we did our picnic on that Juneteenth side. We ended up like hosting a virtual event for Juneteenth. So we had like a lot of different like artists and creators come in, but like this was fully like,
Wait, was that the intersection of Host Owambe to plan that party for the Juneteenth?
I mean, that was where I started thinking about, a social side. I didn't want to do too much planning at that sense. But what
Right.
I actually did do was I had written this post on Medium before we got into this Juneteenth stuff that ended up getting a lot of traction, is what I'd say. Basically, when George Floyd was murdered, like it's the way that I processed my thoughts. And I was like, okay, I've been in all these different spaces. I'm so tired of this. I cannot be the sounding board for my non-black friends. Is really what it that's what it comes down to. People, I'll say people still find that article today. It's yeah, it's a little insane. But where Hosawame came into this is that I was like, okay, people are planning different events. Let me actually like have this list for people of how to host the perfect Juneteenth event. And so I had recommendations around like what the food could look like, what the music could, how people should think about like colors into it, like all this stuff. And I would say every year at Juneteenth, it still peaks now because I think at that time it was just getting a lot of hits. So it's still like one of those things that Juneteenth is coming up. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow. So okay. I mean, there's so much in there. So first of all, I didn't even know where to start to dig into this. This snowballs from a conversation of you while you're trying to figure out. I'm in the middle of this pandemic, and this business that I had all these dreams for is not going to be as productive or fruitful. But I want to keep going to all your little side events here, and then you guys are talking, and it snowballs. Jack Dorsey tweets it out. I can't imagine the surge even to the website. You get you get creative, scrappy. It sounds like basically you're a second entrepreneur in the process because you're starting this other business without a fully formed business plan.
It wasn't meant to be a business. This
It
one
wasn't
was
meant to be a
literally
business.
no, it was meant to be a thing for our friends to take the day off for Juneteenth. Like
Wow.
it was like we talked about it at the because I said there was the original 650 companies. Companies still kept on signing up after that point because
Wait, but
Juneteenth
when
was
did you
not
know it was a thing? When did you know it was like, oh my goodness, this is a movement. This is big. Where you're basically, may I say
once
this, influence policy.
we did help influence a lot. And there's a lot of people on the ground who have already been making movement around Juneteenth. So we'll never take credit for making Juneteenth a holiday. I can say we were directly responsible for a lot of companies making a company holiday before it was a federal holiday. Um, but yeah, knew it was a thing once the name started rolling in. Like after, I think again, Jack's stamp helped a lot on just credibility with fellow corporate partners. But when I say like companies are like Netflix, Glossier, Spotify, a lot of people on the market, like there was just a lot of different companies, and the people who were reaching out, I was like, oh no, this is a thing. It's in articles. Celebrities are like referencing it. This like hella Juneteenth, this hella creative
Wow.
company. It was yeah, it was a lot. And at the end of it, we'd also were like, yeah, okay, well, we did that thing. We made this market history that was cool. It was 2 weeks.
You're right. What happened the day
I
after?
mean, we rested, but again, it was not supposed to be anything beyond this 2 week period, like this 2 week chaotic period. But then companies started reaching out to us and they were like, hey, we have this project. Like, can you guys help us do X, Y, and Z? Like,
Mm,
we're not a like company. However, again, going back to the business side, if you hear this thing 3, 4 times, there is a need somewhere
right.
for somebody, and people have money to pay for it. And so, then 3 or 4 conversations later, we started having serious conversation around like what it could look like for us to do this type of work full time. And I had created business plans before, so helped lead my other co-founders who had not created business plans or had not been founders before. Walked them through that process. We all divided and conquered to make a business plan. My now current co-founder, his company, was one of the large marketing shareholding companies. So they,
Okay.
of course, put a lot of interest into this viral campaign that's happening from one of their employees. So, he starts having conversations with them.
Excuse
They're like, yeah, he wanted to build something. They were like, we're invested in this. And I think, there was just so much social capital. And it's the times that it was that this is the only way that this could work. But it was the time. So enough conversations happened through. We negotiate a lot through into place and they agreed to invest in us and yeah,
And that company
that
was
is
called
called Retrospect.
Retrospect.
That
The company you're the
that is
chief
chief
strategy
strategy and
officer.
operations officer now. We've been doing that for almost 4 years.
And how big
So
was the team at the time?
yeah, at that time we were 4 co-founders. It was
Okay.
4 of us, and then we brought on our very first employee in I think 6 months after we had started the company. So
Which was
we're our
after
first,
Juneteenth.
mhm, not after Juneteenth. So yeah, so Juneteenth 2020 happens. Then October, this is actually where Pinterest comes into place. Like I got a job at Pinterest. So I started at Pinterest in August. Then all these conversations are starting to happen. There's just a lot of momentum. And I had said at that point, I just came out of like entrepreneurship. I don't know if I'm like ready to go back into it, but also I would go into it if we had investment. Like that's just a very different situation. And so I'm working at Pinterest, also having these conversations. once they agreed to fund us, then I told my manager at Pinterest, I was like, okay, but I think I gave them about 3 months.
Okay.
During that time, I like documented a lot of things out. I was also, yeah, helping to my manager to build up a like a new vertical there.
Yeah.
So there was just a lot that I was doing entrepreneur wise, like for the company. So I'm there, leaving 3 months, but I had met somebody at Pinterest. She was in New York. We had not met in person just yet, but like I had seen the way that she moved. I had like looked at her background before, and I was like, nah, that's it. That's like who we need is like an employee number one. So when I'm serious, so with my co-founders, there were 3 men at that time. I was like, one, our next hire is going to be a woman. Can't.
Mm-hmm.
She's the
Mm-hmm.
only one. But beyond that, they got to be a jack of all trades, and like she is that, in every sense of the word. And so I started to seed with her. I was like, hey, I have this thing. It was while I was still at Pinterest. I was like, I have this thing. I don't like have full clarity of what it is yet. I don't know if we're gonna raise it, but like I think that you could be great for it. Next thing you know, we do conversations, we meet different candidates, but she was it.
Wow. And that's how Retrospect was born. So there's a lot of time to that journey because I think it sounds like the Pinterest opportunity, did it come because of the Juneteenth? Did they tie that back to you?
I don't think it came to me because of that.
Okay.
My my Medium article, so what I said had actually been shared around through
Yeah. Yeah.
through Pinterest on one of the channels. So I think people knew my name from that, but
Okay.
the job at Pinterest I got because one of my fellow founders, when I was like, oh, I'm putting Hoswambe on hold, like she and I used to do regular conversations. She was like, oh, this person I used to work with at Facebook, they're Pinterest. I think she just put up a role. Let me just make an introduction. She made that introduction. We did a conversation, a couple ones with the team,
Wow.
and started
So
there.
your network basically came through. So you talked about community earlier. You talked about your undergrad community and network then so I love how that's all connected. So I want to switch gears here for a second because first of all, I think actually no, before we even do that, I think it's I'll be remiss not to ask this because you're a Nigerian American, you literally again help amplify and support a very big initiative that's meaningful to the African American community. And unfortunately, you don't see a lot of that type of integration
Yep.
between between the African and African American communities. So was there any noise around that? Was there any were you just moving at lightning speed where you couldn't even pay attention to, oh, I'm Nigerian,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be in this space, or were you getting like, who is she to be doing
No.
this? How did that
Yeah.
go?
So I would say there was not negative noise in that sense. If anything, it was I would say we were very conscious about it as a team. So there's myself, who's Nigerian American, like born in Nigeria, but raised here in the States. One of the other people, who was also one of our co-founders at that time, he's Nigerian American as well, but was born in LA. Also, like grew up here, but then he had went back to live in Nigeria for some time. My co-founder Quentin, he's Chicago, like Black American through and through. One of the other people, again, also another co-founder, he was Jamaican, like Jamaican American. Like the whole collective was very diasporic. And so I think for me, it was important, one, to learn about the holiday, but two, as a Nigerian American, I always hold the duality of like both of my cultures. And I think before I went to college, I feel like I was forced to reckon with that duality where people are like, well, no, you're Nigerian. Or they'd be like, well, no, you're
Mm.
black. And I was like, well, I'm just both. Like I'm a mix. And so I recognize with like a holiday like this, no, it's true. It's very important to black people, not just black Americans. And so I think that
Mm.
distinction is important for people when people see me out in the world, they see a black woman. If you're
Exactly.
Nigerian, you will see a Nigerian woman. Although
Right.
in the DMV, people think I'm Ghanaian, so that's something else. But people will see being able to amplify like that history, like Black American history, broader like diasporic history, was really important to do that in a way that's like, okay, well, I'm in a position to do this, but like, how do I make sure I learned as much as possible? And I'm like, again, we had also people in our group who were like Black Americans from Texas, so like knew Juneteenth in another way. So it's just making sure we had the right voices in the room, who that was their actual lived experience. But then also my lived experience is, well, I'm Black. People see me as Black, so like what is the role that I have in this? What are the gaps that like I need to learn? How do I help other people like learn around like their gaps as well too?
I love how organic that was, and you guys. It sounds like you guys were quite intentional about making sure there was a voice at the table for every single type of black, for lack of a better word. Right?
Yeah.
There were very different ways we all saw the same thing, and I always say I think it's important that Africans pay respect to the fight that happened that makes this possible for us to be here. So I think
Yeah.
it's so amazing that you were part of this crazy snowball movement that pushed for Juneteenth being a recognized holiday in companies. Because you're right, that was just by default. Those companies like, "Ah, if this person is doing it, I'm going to do it too, just so they
Yep.
don't get left out of the conversation." Like you said, social pressure. Wow. Okay, so we're almost done here, but there's a couple of things we haven't touched on because you're obviously a woman of many talents, and I see you laughing.
Sorry, Lola.
Well, I mean, I love it, but you have this nonprofit that you started, and let's even give them some context here. So, when you were in college, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you studied the effects of ADHD in children in Chile.
Mhm.
You were running workshops in Mexico, Jamaica, Tel Aviv. You were doing all that at MIT. I can see why they told you that you were doing everything but the medical stuff, right? But how did all of that shape you? And what made you start your nonprofit? And tell me more about your nonprofit.
Of course. So the nonprofit is called Impact Labs Global Initiative. So
Okay.
for transparency, I don't do anything but the day to day of that anymore. Myself
Okay.
and most of the co-founders, there are people in Nigeria who are still doing
So it's
something
based in
with
Nigeria.
NFP. Yes. So
Okay.
that is specifically a hands-on engineering workshop. So to teach
Mm,
um, university and high school students just like the hands-on application of anything engineering-wise. So part of the motivation to start this is that I guess before college, high school, I don't know if it's just like innate in me, but it's been very important to me to like teach other people or just like give them exposure
mm,
to other fields. And I think some of that has just been driven by like my own level of curiosity to like a lot of fields. I'm like, well, I just want people to like know that the options are here and know that like something is possible for them. And so I did that throughout high school, and then coming to MIT, I would spend my summers doing something that was education like oriented.
mhm.
And so those different countries, Chile, Jamaica, Israel, was all in the vein of like was specifically teaching again university students, but I was also a university student looking back, but
Right. Right.
teaching university students and high school students, just like the application portion and just like the different fields. And so like designing curriculum around that, that just was like innate to who I was. But I remember before I graduated, I started talking to MIT and I was like, hey, like, why don't we have anything like this like on the continent? MIT
Mm,
has like a lot of different opportunities for people to work abroad. But when it comes to the African continent, they were more volunteer based, opportunity. That's
mm.
different than like working back home. So I was starting that conversation, and I learned through a couple conversations there with other people, who were like trying to start similar things. And so somebody at MIT connected me, and like one other person, they're like, "Hey, y'all are all trying to like start things in Nigeria." So that's really how we started. So, a couple of us, my
Wow.
co-founders at the time, one two of them were in Nigeria. They came to the US like for their graduate studies, so for their PhDs. And then me and the other woman on the team, she was like born in Nigeria as well. She grew up in like the DMV area for the most part. So like both of us spent
Hmm.
a lot of time here versus there. But all of us were very passionate about this idea of like Nigeria, we mentioned education is super important to us,
Right.
but sometimes the education is very much like take it all in and then just regurgitate it. And there can be a gap between the application side. But like MIT is very heavy on like the application side and like trying things out and giving you the resources. And so we are all taking that shared experience, like from MIT/Harvard to actually come back home and like do that in the same way. So
No, that is so
yeah.
cool. And it's still a functioning nonprofit. And we'll definitely make sure we get the information in the show notes. I just thought it was so cool that you tied all these different experiences. But now it's even more interesting to see why the medical, whoever was checking your history was like, I mean, I know you want to do this, but I'm not seeing it in everything you've done. Especially by using every summer to go back and teach. All right, so we're gonna go into the final round, and
Yes.
actually two rounds. I shouldn't have said final
Okay.
round. That was pre-final round, and
Okay.
I think one thing, and you touched on this throughout, but I just had to ask off the bat, like, what is something that has pretty much sustained you through all these different, I don't want to call them failures, but lessons learned. Like, what is that one thing? How did you overcome the fear, the uncertainty? What is that one thing that just kept you locked
Yeah.
and loaded?
I'm gonna say it's two things. So it's two things. So one is a faith aspect. So I am Christian. I am a believer. God and I be having a roller coaster relationship. So sometimes it's up here, sometimes it's down here. But we know ourselves. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say that throughout the entire course of my career and just life, it feels like my steps have been crafted for me. And I don't say that lightly. Like the opportunities that have come to me, they come at the right time. And people are seeing these pivots and these moves. And they're like, how are you getting there? Like, that's a good question. I don't know either, because like the opportunities are coming my way. And so I do believe that God has specifically like guided my steps, and he continues to guide my steps even in
Mm.
this season where there's a lot of change. Like God is literally placing me in the spaces that he wants me to be. The second part of that, I would say, is my community. So I've always, I've been very social as a person. I like used to be more extroverted, but I'm just like social in nature. But I've seen the value of like the relationships that I've built, not like work first, but really in a people first manner, that
Mm-hmm.
people have continued to speak my name in places that I'm not in. That's both on a personal side, but even on the work side. My jobs are now coming, the opportunities at Retrospect, outside of Retrospect, are literally becoming because of the community that I've built out over time and continue to build.
I love that. Wow. So God, faith, and community. It's all connected,
Yeah,
actually. It's all
faith,
interconnected.
family,
All
friends,
right.
all the apps.
So, if there's one thing though you had to tell anyone listening who's had all these stop gaps or things not going to plan, what would you advise them? How would you tell them to keep going through?
Well, I'm gonna tell you to have faith. So if you don't have faith, I'm gonna tell you have to have
Yeah.
faith. Two, with the community is really identifying the people around you who know what you've been capable of doing before and can remind
Mm-hmm.
you of that in the moment. So even if you can't see it for yourselves, being able to have the honest conversations of like, wow, I was fired, and like, not that I'm just sad about this. It's like making me question everything about myself as a person and what I bring and how I operate, like all these things. People who can help ground you back in that. And number two. And then three, everything is for a season. So
Mm-hmm.
there's always chance for change. Like whatever the current situation looks like today may not look like that in 6 months. It could look like that in 6 months. And it could also look like that in 2 years. But you never know. Like there's it all it takes is one person or one situation to turn things in a completely different direction. So keeping in that mindset that again, what's happening today just is not the reality for forever.
Yes, that is good advice. All right. So we're going into the final one. I call
Okay.
it the lightning round. And there are no wrong
Like,
answers. It's
okay.
really whatever comes to your mind first. Do not let, I have to repeat this, especially for Nigerians, do not let the Nigerian you do more than yourself. There's no
I'm
essay
about to
here.
say, Lalai, you see me throughout this conversation.
I
I
mean,
can't
I
help
see you
myself.
already bubbling. Like, no, whatever comes, don't edit. Just let it out. Just let it
Okay.
flow.
Okay.
Um, and again, all right. So, what is the one thing that you're learning now about yourself?
I know you said what comes to mind first. Okay, I'm learning about myself how to communicate more in the moment. To be completely
Mm.
honest, like I'm very much a written communicator, so I can write my thoughts. I can like get all the things out on paper, but like really expressing what I'm feeling in the moment or what is coming to mind first. So now
Okay.
y'all got to see that in practice.
And the greatest fear you have?
Oh, this is real personal, but
Yeah, it's called a lightning round for
yeah.
a reason.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. The greatest fear is like never truly being like in love with a partner. Uh,
Mm.
very
And that's the season you're in right now,
that is the
right?
season I'm in.
Okay. What would you consider okay, this would be interesting. What do you consider your greatest achievement to date?
It's definitely the Juneteenth moment.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, being able to impact something at like a national and a global scale, I feel like I've had my make history moment. Like even if I did nothing else in life, I know that I've literally made history.
I couldn't agree more. I think that was big. And I remember when our company, where I was working my day job, we made it a corporate holiday. Just knowing that it was actually Nigerian behind the scenes who helped push this is just crazy. Like not expected. Okay. What matters most to you?
Like relationships, but I don't mean that like surface level. I mean like my little connections or like true interactions with people. Like I want shared memories. Like I'm at a season in my life that I prioritize like my experiences or my memories with people over anything else. So
Mhm.
those life moments, they matter to me, and it can be the big birthdays, weddings, all of that, sure, but then also like the couch moments, just to like, hey, I'm coming over to your place. How are you? What are you thinking about? What's in your mind?
Yeah, I like that. If you could go back in time and tell yourself something when you were 20, like right out of college, what would you tell yourself?
It's gonna be okay. Like all of these things will make sense later, but it's okay to do all these different. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to do something different. Like it's really
Wow.
okay.
I like that. I like that. All right. Okay, this one's a good one. So, three words that you use to describe yourself as the Kadara woman. Remember, Kadara means destiny. Three words.
Just three separate words.
Yes. See,
Okay. No. I have three. I have three. I'm proactive, humble, and a doer. That's
okay. See? Look at that. You just fought against that Niger spirit to do more. I love that. And then the last question, what are your thoughts on destiny?
I believe in destiny, but I think destiny is grounded in faith. So
Mm,
I think you have to have faith in order to be able to follow your destiny and in order for it to come to fruition. I think destiny, there's all these things that are possible. But like if you don't take the first step, you'll never even like access or see what was possible. They're like there,
yeah.
going
Yeah.
into it.
I love that. And before we wrap up actually, there's something I said I was going to ask you which was about your gap.
Yes.
And I'm curious as someone who also has a gap, did you have any insecurities growing up with that?
I had a lot of insecurities. Like your friends around you are like wearing braces and like that just wasn't like seen as the beautiful thing. There's actually a fun fact about my two front teeth in my gap. So when I was 7, I was racing my sister, tripped, and I chipped my front tooth. And that front tooth was not fixed until my sophomore year of college, primarily because dental things, like, they cost a lot of money, and at that point, like, my family couldn't do anything around that, but because of it, all these places I moved to, that was always the first question people asked me.
Mhm.
They're like, "Did you just trip? Like, did you just chip your tooth?" And I always had to explain to people, like, "No, I didn't, like, I actually, like, tripped it, like, this many years ago," and, it was always, like, a topic of conversation. So much so like, my name is Joy, so, like, my smile is one of the first things people call out about me, but then, like,
Mhm.
this tooth, like, that thing was there. So I actually ended up writing my college application around my smile,
Oh
around my tooth.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that I was not expecting that. I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, I think that's a fun way to end. And Joy, thank you so much for just sharing a lot of yourself. And I remember when I first met you, I just said I'd just like to say hello, Joy, and then you just
Yeah.
smile. And so it's interesting that actually that became how you got into MIT. Wow. The irony of
Yeah.
that. Wow. That
It's
is a good one.
crazy.
Well, thank you so much for being on this podcast. Thank you for being on the Kadara Woman podcast. I really, really did enjoy our conversation.
Thank you, and thank you for all that you're doing for all the Kadara women. 'Cause I'm excited to be one of them. So thank you.
And there you have it, folks. The incredible journey of Joy Ekuta. From her early days juggling the cultural pressure to become a doctor to becoming a key player in making Juneteenth a corporate holiday. Joy's story reminds us that our paths are rarely linear, and her experiences teach us the value of embracing change, the power of community, and the importance of faith in ourselves and something greater. Remember, as Joy said, everything's for a season. So whether you're facing rejection, pivoting careers, or chasing a dream, know that your kadara, your destiny, is unfolding one expected turn at a time. Until next time, this is Lola from the Kadara Woman podcast, reminding you that your kadara moment of clarity may have already happened, and all you need to do is embrace it. This podcast was created, produced, and recorded by Lola Shebo Harris and sound edited by Mo Isu. The Kadara Woman podcast is a production of Kadara Media.